Hello, St. John. Welcome to our workshop tonight. Come on in the room and say hello. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Ask the Experts workshop tonight. We have some excellent experts who will be talking about COVID-19 and sending our children back to the classroom. We are excited that they are here to share with us. Be sure to come on in and say hello in the chat section. Good evening. Good evening. Hello and welcome to the St. John Baptist Church Ask the Experts workshop. We are excited tonight. We have some wonderful experts who are going to bring some valuable information about COVID-19 and sending our children back to school. Let everyone know that we're on. Let them know. Go on and send a message to your auntie and your cousin and all of them and tell them to get on St. John Baptist Church right now so that they can get this valuable information about COVID-19 and sending our children back to school. Good evening. Good evening. Welcome. Say hello in the chat section. Hello, everyone. Good evening. We have some folks coming in the room. Good evening, everyone. I'm so glad that you're joining us this evening. We are excited about the information that's going to go forth tonight. This is the largest experts that we've symposium of experts that we've had. So tonight is going to be extra special. That means double the information. Come on in the room. Awesome. Welcome, 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 and good evening, everyone. I want to thank you tonight for joining us at our Ask the Experts on COVID-19 and the classroom. We're sending our students back very shortly, and we want to be prepared to keep them safe and well and return back home with no signs of the virus. So we are excited tonight to have Kelly Kessler with us from the health department, Dr. Cragen, who is our family, does family medicine, and so we're excited about that. We have Miss Consuela Robinson, who is with the Howard County Schools, and also James Lamont, who is also with Howard County Schools. Good evening, Melanie. Good to see you. Thank you for joining us. Pass the word that we are on and we are getting ready to start. Sister Gilmer, welcome tonight. Thank you for joining us. It's always good to see those familiar names. And without further ado, I am going to turn it over to our experts as they share tonight on COVID-19 updates and sending our children back to the classroom.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Thank you again. Reverend Turner and all of the family here at St. John Baptist Church. It's been such an honor to, over the last several months, have an opportunity to talk with you and to have such, important conversation around COVID-19. And so tonight we have a lot that we're going to go over and a lot to cover, and hopefully be able to, just prepare ourselves for, sending our kids and our families back into what hopefully will be a more normal situation for them. I do want to, as we normally do, take a few minutes and just provide an update from the perspective of what is going on with COVID in our community. Um, and those of you that have joined us before know that I think it's really important for all of us to start any conversations around COVID, um, really centering ourselves and honoring ourselves and honoring those that we know have been so impacted by COVID in our community, whether it's, people that we know and love that are first responders, whether it's, teachers and students who have, done amazing, amazing work pivoting back and forth virtually, not virtually, whether it's parents who are finding themselves, suddenly working at home with their children at home with them, whether it's going back to work and kind of realizing new normal there, as I know St. John will be doing, going back into your worship space, and finding, new normal there. I want to recognize the fact that in all of this, my kids actually said this to me. My daughter goes, Mom, in only 4 months, it's going to be 2022. And that means 2020 was 2 years ago. And it kind of struck me. We've been in this a long time, my friends. And so in that time, we have lost in our county alone, in our community, 259 of our neighbors. And those are friends or family members of people that we know, people that we love, people that we've worshiped with, that we've worked with. And that's here in our community. But when you multiply that exponentially with what's happened across our country, across the globe, we know that our friends and families and all of us have been impacted in a very serious way. So before we move on to talking about where we're going and where things are, I'd just like to ask everybody to pause for a second and, in your own way, reflect on how far we've come, reflect on those that are no longer with us on this journey, and, ask for continued strength for all of us as we continue to navigate this. So I'm just going to pause for a second. Thank you, everybody. Um, so where we continue to go, and I know we met 2 weeks ago, our numbers, unfortunately, although we are somewhat holding steady, we are continuing to see a rise in our average positivity rate. To date in Howard County, we've had almost 20,500 cases of COVID-19, but we've had 259 deaths. Our 7-day positivity average as of yesterday was 3.15, and our 7-day average for our population is 11.36. There are, as of yesterday, there were 13 COVID-19 patients in the ICU and acute care units at Howard County General. And we know that the case rates have increased significantly since the end of July, and the vast majority of new cases still continue to be among our unvaccinated persons. We did recently in our county meet the threshold for what is considered by the CDC as substantial community spread. And you can see in our community at this time, we have responded with the recommendation that everyone, regardless of vaccination status, is wearing masks in public indoor settings. As of the 14th of August, we have in the county buildings, we are now required to wear masks in all Howard County buildings, regardless of vaccination status. So it is something that you can be aware of, that we are responding to, as the CDC said, the level of community spread. We are continuing to do a great job in vaccinating our residents. We are truly leading the country, in many ways, leading our state. We are setting unprecedented achievements. 82.8% of Howard County residents that are 18 and over are fully vaccinated. and 74% of our Howard County residents that are 12 to 17 are fully vaccinated. So this is phenomenal work, and we continue to lead, but that still means that we need our community to continue to support those who haven't been ready to be vaccinated or haven't been vaccinated yet. And I think it's just important for us to continue to note the difference where we were when we started our response and where we are now is, as science does, we learn how, and we are learning how to live with and to navigate this environment with COVID. And so, even looking at how we're adapting to the numbers and adapting to changes, I just want to reinforce with folks that we are going to continue to find ourselves in places where we need to make choices as individuals. And some of the things that you can use in sort of guiding your own decision making have to do with the extent of the virus that's circulating in the community, whether or not the people you see have been vaccinated. But again, we know that the variant is, still highly transmissible. I shared with you all 2 weeks ago about my son who was fully vaccinated and had COVID at the time. He is fully recovered and doing just fine. So for anyone who's been praying for him, thank you very much. Um, but we also know that we have to consider how many people are going to be gathering. Where is that gathering going to be held? Indoors, outdoors, how much time you're going to be spending. And these are really good things for us to just kind of keep in our mind as we continue to navigate living with COVID. Um, and we may feel that sometimes we can make different decisions than we can at other times, and that's okay.
May I
Yes,
jump in a little
absolutely,
bit?
Dr. Cragen.
I just wanted, in terms of making your decision, think about three things: the density of where you're going to be, how many people are going to be there. Is it five or less? Is it five or more? And can you spread out? The ventilation in the room. Is there a window that can be cracked? Is there a door that could be opened? And that circulates the air and gets those aerosols that come out of people's breathing and talking and singing and allow them to leave and new fresh air to come in. And then the last thing is time. Is it going to be more than 15 minutes that you're going to be spending in this area? And if it's not ventilated and there's going to be a lot of people, then you need a good quality mask. A KN95 or an N95 is now more recommended, or at least a cloth mask with 2 layers. And a better quality mask would be useful if your children are going back to school. Continue, Kelly. I'm done interrupting.
Thank you. No, absolutely. Thank you very much. No, all good points. And again, we are talking about when we are, making these decisions with our families, with our friends. As I shared earlier, we have a wedding that we're supposed to attend, and it's difficult to think, okay, 250 people in this one small space, and how do we do that? And these are decisions that we are all making and facing for ourselves and for our community. um Vaccine, every person who gets vaccinated is significantly less likely to get severely ill or to die from COVID-19. If you recall way back when we all started joining together in these sessions, um, the vaccine, and we shared this in presentations early on, is never meant to completely prevent. It would be ideal if it completely prevented, but vaccines in general really work to prevent or reduce the severity of illness. And so I've heard this kind of myth of like, well, if people are still getting COVID, why should I get the vaccine? And the reality is the vaccine is still doing what it was intended to do. And what it was intended to do was reduce significant illness and reduce death. And we can see that in a lot of the deaths that are occurring and the severity of illness that really is happening among those that are unvaccinated at this time. But as I said before, we are setting this wonderful example in Howard County as a leader nationally, and in many ways, we're as a public health professional, people are going to read about us in history books later on. I'm very excited about that. We're doing wonderful things, but we still have about 38,000 of our friends, our relatives, our neighbors who are eligible for the vaccine who have yet to get theirs. So I encourage you to think about, hearing about the vaccine and hearing from friends and community members and fellow congregants really does remain one of the most effective ways to, even if it's just planting the seed or piquing the curiosity of folks. Dr. Craig is going to talk more about, now that, Pfizer and the FDA fully authorizing. Some folks were really waiting for that full authorization before they felt comfortable. Perhaps we'll see that. And we have actually seen, as the variant has spread, an uptick in people who have come to us requesting their first dose. We are still here and we are welcoming all of our first dose people with open arms. There is no judgment. We want you vaccinated. So come to us when you are ready. We are here for you. And I will put the information in the chat box about the website where you can find that. And I also want to make sure just to remind people about testing. Testing does continue to still be a really important thing, and we have certainly seen an uptick in testing, especially as people have traveled more, or people have been gathering in large gatherings. They maybe, if they're concerned, that is really when it is recommended for testing. And, we encourage people to get tested. We encourage people to remember that the variant, someone can still spread COVID without being symptomatic. And it's important for, people to continue to be tested, to continue to work cooperatively with contact tracers. If they contact you to say, that you may have, had an exposure, or you have been diagnosed, who has potentially been around you. And these are all things that are going to help us continue to keep up the work we've done so well, and it seems like so long in Howard County.
The
Go
other
ahead.
thing I wanted to mention about testing is that the symptoms with the Delta variant don't tend to be as, they start out very subtle, like a cold. And with sniffling, a tickly throat, a low-grade fever, body aches, as opposed to all the respiratory coughing, which tends to come later. And so it starts out the first couple of days, and it's more like a cold. So especially your children who are going back to school, if they come home with a sniffle and they're just not feeling well, they lost their appetite, you should probably think about getting them tested.
Thank you. And I know we're going to talk a little bit more about that. And we have a ton of great resources that the school system has made available, that we're going to share with folks as well, to help keep people cognizant of that. The last thing I'm going to mention, and I know that this is going to be echoed by my colleagues in many, many ways, is the self-care around COVID-19. And I continue to add this in many ways. It's as important as our testing and vaccine. We have to take care of our minds as well. We've been in this for 2 years, as my 14-year-old wanted to remind me. Half of her middle school career is the other way she likes to remind me. And it's hard. I will say it's hard. I think we have all faced moments where we're tired. We've probably all experienced that. And so, although we are an extraordinarily resilient community, and I know the resilience of our children has been astounding, it is still difficult, and learning to adapt and learning to adjust and to do it repeatedly. Self-care is incredibly important. And so I wanted to make sure we shared again the numbers for the resources that we have. Not only important places like Grassroots, the Maryland Crisis Connect number, as well as the crisis text line, but also if you are finding yourself struggling with finding resources for food security, finding resources for, people are, having insecurity with employment, insecurity with insurance, many other things. We do have resources like Care App that are available. And I know that the school system is a wonderful connector for things, and has been incredibly instrumental in keeping our young people fed as this has gone on. And so I think it's important to just remind all of ourselves of those things, and again, we will share that. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Cragen, because I know that there are lots of updates, even in the short 2 weeks that we've had. I'm gonna turn it over to you, Dr. Cragen, to talk about this, and then I will introduce our speakers when you're done.
Okay. Hello, St. John family and others who have joined us. I am so happy to be here to share the news with you. And I'm sure you've probably heard it that we have our first fully FDA approved vaccine for COVID-19, which is the Pfizer vaccine. And it is approved for 16 and up for full FDA approval. You've probably noticed that a lot of different companies and the military, lots of state governments are now mandating vaccinations. Lots of hospitals are doing the same, nursing homes, and you'll probably see it as a wave across the country now that we have our first fully approved, fully FDA approved vaccine. And the question that I get all the time is, what about the boosters? Currently, we have 3 vaccines that are approved for use in the United States, Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson & Johnson's vaccine. And all of them are efficacious, meaning they work well, and they have a very good safety profile. They have been doing studies to see when they might need a booster. And what they found so far is that the immunocompromised and the elderly are the ones who may have never made an effective immune response for the people who are vaccinated. Our immune systems are the best in our 20s to our 40s. And when we're really little, they're not so great. And so that's the reason why kids get multiple booster shots, 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, 18 months, and just before kindergarten and middle school and high school, and then before college, because their immune systems don't remember very well. They're great, they mount an immune response, and then it wanes. And that's normal for any viral illness. This is not unexpected or surprising. That's the reason why kids get boosters. Same for older adults. They get boosters on their pneumonia shots and tetanus shots and a variety of other shots because their immune system just doesn't remember as well. So it's not unexpected that we would expect for there to be a need for boosters in the elderly population. And so that is what the CDC is recommending. Boosters for those 65 and older and those who are immunocompromised. Just to remind their immune system, this is what you're supposed to be looking for. This is what you're supposed to be fighting. And we still have good immunity for those who did mount an immune response. They're doing great. The vaccines are doing what they're supposed to do. They're keeping people from being hospitalized. They're keeping people from dying. So the talk about the boosters isn't that they're not working. They just are concerned because the Delta variant is very highly contagious, and that the government has talked about after September 20th that regular adults who are 16 and older can get a booster shot 8 months after their original shot. Now, that hasn't been FDA approved yet, but I always like to tell you guys what's coming down the pike so you're not surprised. And we'll see if the FDA does approve the booster shots that are supposed to be coming up for those who are non-immunosuppressed. Remember, we are all in this together, and until we are all vaccinated, and by all, I mean the world, not just Howard County, not just Maryland, not just the USA, but every country and as many arms as possible to cut down on the possibility of future variants that will sweep through and cause us problems as we try to get back into our lives. For those who are under the ages of 12, we do not have a vaccine for them yet. The studies are ongoing, and we should hear something about their results this fall, hopefully before Christmas, but definitely before spring break. We should have some, like I said, the studies are ongoing. And now that there are so many kids getting ill with COVID, it's easy to fill up the studies, unfortunately, and that will help speed up the results of the studies. But The boosters are probably coming. I don't know if it'll be this fall. They say after September 20th, but we shall see. Just wondering if there was something else you wanted me to speak on. Oh, I know. There was one other thing. Children do get COVID. And so watch your children when they come home if they are not doing well, if they are getting sick. And we're also having an uptick of respiratory syncytial virus, RSV, for the young kids who are 12 and under, elementary school age and babies. So there are a couple of different viruses that will be out this fall: RSV, COVID-19, and the plain old flu. So if your child gets sick, take them in, have them assessed, get them tested, and make sure that they do okay. The reason why it's important to know is that monoclonal antibodies are something that you can use for people 12 and older to help to decrease the likelihood of them getting ill or being hospitalized if they do get infected with COVID-19. And that has to be given within the first 10 days. So the sooner you find out, the sooner you can protect your loved one. All right, I am done for now.
That's wonderful. And I'm just going to piggyback off what Dr. Cragen said as a reminder. We know that a lot of young people did kind of get off schedule with their regular vaccine schedule during this last 2-year period or last 18 months. And so if you are looking for vaccine clinics or you're looking for the, an opportunity to get caught up, because many of those are vaccines that are required for your child to be in school, as my school system colleagues can attest to. So if you need support, by all means, we're always able and willing to help do that. I'm going to try and say a prayer that technology works for us here. I wanted to just show very quickly a quick video of a family, and they're actually Howard County Public Schools family, and sort of their decision about getting vaccinated. So let's see if this works and if I can do it without totally throwing all things off. Let's see. Can you guys hear that? Okay, I'm not going to try to scare the technology. I'm going to put the link in this chat box. This is a wonderful family that is right here from Howard County, and they have a very unique story in that the father and their sons agreed and participated in clinical trials because they believe so much in vaccine. And you will have the opportunity to hear their mother kind of share sort of her take on why it's so important in helping keep our kids in school and getting them back in school, which, if technology cooperated, would be a perfect segue into our next presenters. But as we know, sometimes technology doesn't always cooperate with us. So I am really honored to introduce two of my colleagues. And I will say, professionally, I have the good fortune of getting to cross paths and work with them. But personally, as a parent of children in the school system, I am reassured in my mind knowing that they are really leading and directing, because I really do know and can personally attest to how much they care for our babies, which I know my children would hate that I'm calling them babies, as my son, who's going to be a freshman, has orientation this week. But we're extraordinarily fortunate to have James Lamont, who's the executive director of the Community Parent and School Outreach for the school system, and Consuelo Robinson, who is instructional facilitator for social work. These two individuals have worked tirelessly over this last 18 months, not only helping to, work with families, work with the community, work with faculty and staff to make sure that our families, not just our children, but our families, really have had the supports that they need. And I know that they are working tirelessly right now as we prepare to welcome our kids back into the building. And so thank you both so much for making the time this evening to kind of talk about what what Howard County Public Schools are doing, and how that's working. So I'm gonna turn it over to you, Mr. Lamont.
All right, thank you, Ms. Kelly Kessler. And again, it's been an absolute pleasure being able to work with you over the past several years as well. Again, my name is James Lamont, and my title is Executive Director of Community Parent School Outreach. And I'm also a proud and longtime member of St. John's Baptist Church, me and my family. I just wanted to say that. I'm here this evening representing Howard County Public Schools. And what I first want to do before I pass on Ms. Consuelo Robinson to give some tips about how we can help our students transition back in school. I'm going to share some information and reference some information that's been shared today and over the past few weeks by our superintendent in regards to our moving back to school, to basically hopefully getting back to normal, to regular school. And we are quickly approaching the first day of school and making the preparation needed to warmly welcome back students and staff. We are eagerly counting down the days until school doors open, and we're all excited. And we know that our students are excited, our teachers, administrators, and our families as well. We just want you to know we're ready. As Dr. Maturano would say, we're ready. We're ready because I believe Dr. Maturano and our school board's vision has been very clear for students to be back in school and receive in-person instruction every day throughout the entire school year. That is our goal. All of our efforts have been focused on that ultimate goal. Dr. Maturano announced several decisions recently about masking, staff vaccination, and other health protocols. He made none of those decisions lightly. He obviously got some strong endorsements by obviously the Howard County Health Department, who is a tremendous partner with us and has been even before the pandemic, but it's only become stronger since. And I know they always reference the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the Maryland Department of Health, and American Academy of Pediatrics. So, we always want to make sure we have the right information, and we also get feedback from our partners as well. All of our staff and any contractors who work with our students will be fully vaccinated or undergo weekly testing. Universal masking will be in place for everyone inside the school, regardless of their vaccination status. We will maximize the use of outdoor spaces for lunch at every school, including the placement of additional tables and the use of tents at our elementary schools. So all our elementary schools will have tents and tables outside. Anyone showing COVID symptoms during the school day will be tested and isolated. We will work with the Howard County Health Department to conduct comprehensive contact tracing and necessary quarantine messaging as well. And we've already been doing that for a while now. Our other mitigation measures include HVAC maintenance, installation of CO2 sensors, availability of PPE, and regular cleaning and disinfecting procedures. All these measures are a layered effort to protect our students and our staff. This summer, it appeared that COVID may be nearly behind us, but unfortunately has gained some steam over the past few weeks. It does not discourage us, but it does make us amplify the critical necessity of implementing as many mitigation strategies as possible. We understand there continues to be some anxiety about the return to school, and that's why Ms. Consuelo Robinson is going to talk some more about that and give some tips here in a minute. Many of our students haven't been in a classroom in a year and a half. Think about that. We have some students that have not been in school for a year and a half. We have administrators that, they don't even know they're freshmen that came, and now they're sophomores. So it's been a long time. We have great faith that our schools are well prepared and our teachers and school staff are eager to welcome, support every student and each other as we begin this journey back to hopefully full instruction starting next week. I also want to just add about meals. Meals will be free for any student in our school. So for the whole school year, I think that's very important that, our students have access to breakfast and lunch. And also transportation. I think today it was posted on the website, but I do think there were some technical issues with the transportation information that's come out. Again, there's been some shortages of bus drivers, not just in Howard County or state of Maryland, but across the country. Obviously, we've been impacted. So I would encourage our families also look on our website, hopefully tomorrow, and look up the transportation information. Also, there's some links that we will add in the chat that has a lot of great information, and really some of what I shared just now, where families can go and get a lot of their questions answered. And we just want to make sure people have the right information and as we move forward to getting our students back in school next week. So at this time, I'm going to pass on Ms. Consuelo Robinson, and she's going to talk about how we can support our kids' social emotional well-being during reentry. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lamont. Good evening, Reverend Turner and members of the St. John community. Thank you so much for having us this evening. I am going to speak on the topic of how to support your child's social emotional well-being during school reentry. So I want to start out this evening with a quote. Next slide, please. And that quote is, "Parenting is the easiest thing in the world to have an opinion about, but the hardest thing in the world to do." By way of introduction, I just want to say that this last year has been filled with many challenges and unknowns, which have affected all of us in different ways. In addition to being parents or caregivers, many of us have had to balance multiple responsibilities and learn new ways of supporting our children's education. And we know that trying something new may involve lots of feelings. Fear, we've heard the word anxiety used this evening, and even frustration. It may involve mistakes when we're trying something new. And we may often wish we had the opportunity to correct or have a do-over, as young folks say. And that's both for adults and for children. Sometimes we want that opportunity to have a do-over. And it's okay. There's no manual on parenting during a pandemic. We're all figuring things out as we go. So I ask, as we proceed and as we think about how to best support our students' social emotional well-being, to just keep in mind to be patient with yourself and your child, to give yourself and others grace, to reserve judgment of how someone else is doing something. Most just breathe. This is not easy, but know that support is available, and try to remain positive and hopeful. That is just going to go such a long way in supporting your students. So next slide, please. So today's focus, I'm going to give you information on supporting your child's transition back to school. As I just mentioned, there's no manual, but I'm hoping that at least I can try to give you a couple tips that will be helpful. And then I'm going to share some resources with you that may be helpful to support your child in returning to school. So next slide. In terms of the 10 tips. So the first I would say is to either set or reestablish routines and schedules. For some students, particularly younger students, this may be their first time ever stepping foot in a school building. But we know that kids do best with a stable routine and very clear expectations. So particularly for younger students, we want to create schedules or a morning routine for waking up and getting dressed. We want to keep the schedule posted in visible places. Try to set a consistent bedtime. I know with virtual instruction, and especially the summer, that bedtimes may be different than they would be if we were physically going into buildings. So we want to try to set that consistent bedtime. Create a school-ready checklist, and make sure that you're practicing mask wearing, hand washing, and social distancing, which we know is very helpful in keeping our students safe. The next slide, please. Tip 2. We know that coping with change is hard, and we can be honest about this, but at the same time help to strengthen our kids' coping skills by reframing our language, meaning that we can be honest about a situation and validate our children's feelings, but use language that is inspiring and positive. So this chart just provides some examples of things that you might want to say and things that you might not want to say if you're looking to really inspire hope and reframe language into more positive language. So for example, we would never say, "This is terrible." Instead, we might say, "This is temporary, it hurts now, but you'll feel better over time." Or instead of saying, "I don't know what to tell you," something that you might want to say instead is, "Let's think through this together. And what can we do to help you feel better about this situation?" So just some example of how to reframe and use positive language while still being honest. So tip 3, partner with your child's school. I know that this can be difficult. Sometimes we may feel that we don't want to share too much information with the school for fear of judgment or for many different reasons. But please know that we are here to help, and we can't help if we don't know what your family is experiencing or what you have experienced. So please know that we're here to help. If your child is feeling sick, please keep them home, and support classroom lessons that are occurring in school by trying to practice those lessons at home as well. And this includes social emotional learning. We know that students are going to come back to school with many different needs. And so social emotional learning is an important part of what's going to be provided to students as they transition back to school. Academics is important, of course, but students aren't able to access those academics if they're not feeling good, if they're not in a good space emotionally. So we really are focusing quite a bit on social emotional lessons in Howard County schools. In fact, today, all 77 of our schools and staff from those schools had training specific to social emotional learning and how to support students as they transition back to school. So we encourage you as parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, caregivers, of any way to please support social emotional learning in the home as well. Next slide, please. So the fourth tip is to have knowledge of social emotional learning in school. So social emotional learning is the process of learning important social and emotional skills that are important for functioning in life, and in school and in work settings. It's most effective if it's taught to students early and continued through high school. And this is just as important as academic subjects. It's not just an add-on. This is extremely important because these skills can carry you through life. So we want parents to have knowledge of social emotional learning in schools. And again, going back to partnering with your schools, ask your child's teachers, what are you doing to support social emotional learning in the classroom? Is that having morning groups to ask students how they're feeling before any work is started? You want to know what your students' teachers are doing and try to support that in the home as well. So tip 5. So this is an example of how you might be able to support social emotional learning in the home. I apologize, the chart on the right is very little, but it has different emotion and feeling words in that chart. So as parents, you can start to build a strong emotional vocabulary for your child. So you want to help them with naming feelings and encourage your child to discuss their feelings, using words like frustrated or lonely or excited. Teach them more complex feeling words and what those words mean, and encourage them to be more thoughtful and to use those words and talk about feelings at home rather than keeping things bottled up. Next slide, please. So self-care. I think, Ms. Kessler, you mentioned that earlier. And this is so extremely important because you can't pour from an empty cup. So if you want to pour into your children and pour into others, you have to have your cup full as well. And I think sometimes we may think that taking care of yourself is selfish. No, that's not at all true. So please know that self-care is not selfish. Self-care may look very different depending on who you are and your interest. But just know that self-care is not a one-time thing. It's a way to fill your cup regularly. And it's a healthy habit, and it should be practiced daily. It can be something such as going for a walk. All of us, or most of us, have been working on computers a lot. So it could involve just taking some time away from the screen. That's self-care. Again, it looks different for everyone, but find out what works for you in terms of taking care of yourself, because I'm sure we've all heard that we can't be good to others if we're not good to ourselves. So please practice taking care of yourself. That is so critical during this time. Next slide, please. So tip 7 is expect behavioral changes or not. And the reason that I say or not is because every young person is different. Some students, these behavioral changes will be very apparent. Other students, you may not see a lot of changes. But some of the possible changes that you may see are listed here. Anxiety definitely is very prevalent right now. Fear, because there's a lot that is unknown right now. So fear could be very common as well. In younger children, you may see clinginess or just fear of separating from parents. In adolescents, you may see some irritability, Moodiness or meltdown. Some people might say irritability is typical of teenagers. For some, yes. But if you're seeing this more than normal, you know your children and your young adults in your lives best. So if you're seeing increasing irritability, that's something to definitely pay attention to. Again, trouble eating or sleeping, sadness. Sometimes the behavioral changes can be somatic, where you're looking at increased aches and pains, and there doesn't seem to be really a reason for it. We can notice social isolation as well. Students or young people may be less talkative. And also students or young people can tend to be overly self-critical. So these are all things that we should definitely look out for in terms of knowing when our students or young people in our lives might need help. The key is to be attentive to these behaviors and to remember that as parents or caregivers, you know the young people in your lives best. So trust yourself in terms of knowing when to seek attention. And I believe that is tip number 8, is knowing when to seek professional help. So if your child is experiencing any of the following and just look at this and compare it to your child's previous behavior, this may be an indication of when to seek professional help. And we'll certainly share some resources at the end of this presentation. But as Ms. Kessler mentioned, certainly contacting grassroots crisis intervention. In the schools, every school does have a school counselor. So you want to contact your child's school counselor. I'm also going to give a shameless plug here that we do have mental health therapists in, I'm proud to say, 30 of our schools currently. And I have the privilege of supervising those social workers and therapists in the schools. This year, very excited to say that we are expanding to 20 additional schools. So by the end of this school year, 50 of the 77 schools in Howard County will have therapists in school buildings to provide support to students. So that is wonderful, and I'm very excited to be a part of that expansion effort. Lastly, we have 2 more. We're almost there. So tip 9 is just building resilience and healthy coping skills for your students. And so resilience is really that ability. We hear the word a lot. It's really the ability to cope with and rise to the challenges and problems and setbacks that we may meet in the course of our lives and come back even stronger from those setbacks. Many resiliency skills can be taught and are often learned from age-appropriate frustration and struggle. So that leads to this last bullet here on this slide. We see listen, do not offer to immediately fix the situation. We want to help problem solve and build on existing coping skills. And that's part of building resilience is sometimes we may have the urge to just jump in and we want to fix it as adults. But again, many of those resiliency skills are learned from age-appropriate frustration and struggle. So it's okay not to immediately jump in and fix, but to actually help your child through that problem-solving process. And lastly, tip 10, and this is for students as well as adults, is stay connected with those individuals in your life who are important. There has been a lot of isolation during the last 17 months. Especially during the early stages of having to be more limited in terms of being in our homes. But it's so important and just to stay connected with loved ones and friends in your lives and plan activities to look forward to, whether that is taking a walk or doing arts and crafts or just having a special dinner together, taking day trips. Those things are so important and give us something to look forward to. So we ask that you keep that in mind in terms of supporting your student as well. So lastly, I just want to thank you for having us this evening. My contact information is here on this slide. I also want to include, I believe there's some resources that we have here on the next slide. Yes, we also have school system resources. So please feel free to reach out to myself or Mr. Lamont. And then lastly, I just want to acknowledge that I wish I was brilliant enough to have come up with all of these ideas on my own, but I was not. So there were many people in the school system who contributed to these tips in this presentation. So I just wanted to acknowledge their efforts as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Hey, Ms. Kessler, can I follow up to Mr. Robinson real quick?
Absolutely. Go for it.
First of all, thank you. Great job, Consuela. I'm sitting there listening to you, and in a minute, I'd like for you to explain more about the school-based mental health program and what exactly that means, how they can access it. But I want to talk about student support teams, because as we transition back into our schools, I mean, we talked about some things to look for, and obviously we hope our kids transition is very smoothly. But what I would encourage parents to do, if you have any concerns at all along the way in regards to your students, what is the academic performance or any other kind of behavior things that you may be concerned about, please do not hesitate to reach out to your school counselor or someone at the school psychologist, social worker. Every school in Howard County has what we call a student support team. They call them SSTs. They have counselors on there. They have nurse, pew personnel workers, alt ed teachers are on there, social workers, teachers, the administrators are part of it. And their goal is, as a team, if a teacher has concern or a family has concern, to reach out to the counselor or to the teacher. It may get referred to SST depending on what it is. And their job is to try to figure out how to problem solve, right? And hopefully the earlier intervention, the better. And there's different tiers of intervention. But I just want you all to know, as we move forward back in the transition to school, that do not be afraid to use our school-based staff as resources. If you have any questions or any concerns, there's no dumb questions. And I always say, ask the questions earlier than later, if possible. And because we have a lot of good resources in our schools. But every school has a student support team. During the pandemic, they have been just invaluable. Whether it was helping identify families that might not have internet access or hotspots, or just a whole range of food access, a whole range of things. And that's what they're for. I just want to make sure that you all know that they're out there and they're available. And Mr. Robinson, I don't know if you can kind of explain actually a little bit more about your program. You don't understand. We are so excited. Dr. Martirano has been such an advocate since he's been here about mental health. The program's only been for a few years. I'll let her explain it, but we're really excited about some changes that are coming up to help support our kids and families.
Sure. I'm happy to talk a little bit more about our school-based mental health program. So as I mentioned, we are starting out the year in 31 schools, but we are going to expand by the end of this school year to 50 schools. Currently, we have 11 social workers in our school-based mental health program. All of the social workers are licensed clinical social workers. What that means is that they're licensed at the highest level of licensure for a social worker, and that they, through that license, are able to provide therapy services in the schools. Those 11 social workers can provide therapeutic services to any student, regardless of the student's insurance status. We have bilingual social workers on our team as well, so we're very excited about that. Bilingual in Spanish. Again, very excited about that. We also have partnerships with community agencies, because we know that it would be difficult for those 11 social workers to try to reach 50 different schools. So that's where we really rely on the partner agencies that we have relationships with. And our social workers work very closely with those partner agencies and connect those agencies with other students in the schools who may also need support. As Mr. Lamont mentioned, the referrals for those therapy services come through the student support team. And again, that's really our problem-solving team within the schools. So those teams include the school administrator, school nurses, school counselors, school psychologists, as well as the social workers. So really, if a student comes to the attention of that team, you have a variety of people who are working to determine what supports are going to best help that student be successful in school. So if you have a student or young person in your life who you feel might benefit from school-based mental health services, the first point of contact should be the school counselor, because that person sits on that student support team, and they can come to that team and let the team know that the parent or caregiver has expressed interest in their child receiving therapeutic services at the school. Once that student's name is brought to the attention of the student support team, the team will discuss whether school-based mental health services are appropriate or whether there are other services in the community that might benefit the student. And if the referral goes through, then the parent will receive a telephone call from either the social worker or school counselor on next steps to how to get those services started. And again, they are provided in the school. And the point of the services is really to try to reduce barriers. We know that a lot of times there can be such long wait lists in the community to access mental health treatment. Sometimes another barrier could be parents having to take time off from work, and that may not be an option for all parents. So really the main point of the program is to support students' emotional well-being, but also to remove barriers to mental health treatment. And we also hope that it will remove stigma a little bit by not having to go into an office to receive treatment, that we're offering the services right there in the school, which is a pretty familiar place to students and families.
That is so very important to allow our kids to have a little bit of control and to be able to access help when they need it.
Thank you.
It's amazing.
Thank
I wanted to remind people that if they have questions, they can put them in the chat, either on Facebook, YouTube, or that way we can answer any questions that you might have. And while we're waiting to see if there are any questions, I did want to bring up two things. Mr. Lamont, you had brought up about distancing in schools at lunchtime. And I just want to remind parents to encourage their kids to have good mask wearing habits, that they practice a little bit before they go to school, that they have a mask that fits well. Like I said, a KN95, the ones that go over the ears and go above the nose and under the chin, they're usually white, and N95. Most kids have a little more difficulty using those, but if you're going to wear a KN95, put your cloth mask over it, and it'll form a nice seal for you. If you're going to be at lunchtime, outside is best while the weather permits, and if not, because you have to take off your mask to eat, then definitely socially distant in a well-ventilated area, a larger room or someplace where there's a little space. And then yeah.
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to add, Dr. Cregan, something I think, a lot of parents have experienced some, those of us that sort of had sent our children back for hybrid towards the end of last school year. One of the interesting things that I noted with one of my children was that they kind of had increased anxiety, not in the classroom, but especially around lunchtime.
Mm-hmm.
And we found that, this particular one of my two younger children was sort of skipping meal because of that. And once we had that conversation, I was actually able, kind of to what Mr. Lamont and Ms. Robinson were saying, that home to school communication is so critically important. I actually just sent a real quick email to her guidance counselor, and I said, hey, I just wanted to make you aware, is it possible to, I know there's other kids and obviously it's busy. And it actually opened up a great conversation. And, it was just a simple, like a nod in the cafeteria that helped her feel more comfortable, like actually eating her sandwich. And especially in middle school and young girls, making sure that they're getting all the nutrition that they need. For all of our children, we have to feed their brains and their health. But, it's interesting. You mentioned some of the things that come out in terms of anxiety or other things. It was never an issue in the classroom. It just happened to be in that one particular space. But, we encourage people to, think through that and, reinforce the importance of the nutrition at lunch, but also don't hesitate to communicate. And when I say reach out to the school, I also want to reinforce the idea of being gracious in our outreach to our schools, because I guarantee you that everyone is going to be doing the very best that they can for all of the kids in the cafeteria, all of the kids who are eating outside, all of the kids who are in their classrooms. And it's going to look different. Everybody's kind of working through a lot as it goes. But I think that's where, that increase in parent school communication is going to be so important as we move forward. I see heads nodding, so I hope that was okay for me to do a plug for talk to your school. But
if I can just follow up with you, and excuse me, I'm sorry. You are so right, and like I said, the earlier the better. And like I said, hey, the students will be anxious. I have to say, our staff has some anxieties too, right? So this is new for everybody. So we have to be aware of that. And please, we will always be gracious, and our families have been wonderful as well. But again, do not. That's why I brought up the SST teams and the other resources. We have staff in the building. That's what they do. You know what I mean? It's communicate with our parents, but also with our students and the other staff members as well. So please make sure you reach out to us at the school. If you have any questions, like Ms. Robson said, start with the counselor. Can't reach a counselor, find the administrator. But open those lines of communications. And again, this is going to be a transition for everybody because no one's ever been through this before.
One last thing I would say to our families is to make a plan. So if anybody in your family comes down sick, decide, like you can look up in advance where you can get some monoclonal antibodies, depending on the age of the people in your family. Anybody 12 and up can get them. They have them at Howard County General Hospital. They have them at Johns Hopkins. But you go to hhs.gov and you can find where monoclonal antibodies are going to be available to you. That way you can keep your family members and your children from getting sick, hospitalized, and long COVID. Because we know that even vaccinated people can sometimes get the disease. Doesn't tend to be serious. They don't tend to have hospitalization and death, but we want to make sure people stay as healthy as possible, and monoclonal antibodies are a part of that plan. And that is all I had to say.
I see Lisa. Lisa lets Dr. Cragen and I run wild sometimes, but when we see her come on, it means we have to start, like, she's giving us the wrap it up. If she had a crook and hook next to us, she would, if we were in the building, she'd be pulling us off. But Lisa,
Listen,
I'm gonna turn it over to you.
This has been some valuable information. I mean, I don't have kids in Howard County. I just have the joy of working in Howard County. But as I send my little one to Anne Arundel County schools, I sat in the parent meeting just a few days ago, and I was like, I know what I know about Howard County. Are you guys doing this? Are you guys doing that? And so it is just great to hear this information. This has been very valuable. I do want to ask a question of Mr. Lamont. So you stated in your talk about if a child shows up at school and they are showing symptoms, that they are administered a COVID test. And I just want you to talk a little bit about what that looks like for the child. And of course, I'm sure with parent permission, but that you are administering tests at the school. I know this was one of my questions with Anne Arundel, and they were like, "No, ma'am, we're not giving tests. We're just calling the parents and telling them to come get your baby." But I think that is a wonderful thing that you are offering. But what does that look like for the kid? And what should the parent know about if their kid has to be tested at school?
Yeah, so the language I used was anyone showing COVID symptoms during the school day will be tested and isolated. So if we have a concern, we have a process and procedure, and it said some of the documents I sent where we have to make sure we isolate the student and to make sure they're safe. We will contact the family, and then they will go through the different list of questions they would ask, and I'll have them in front of me. But again, we have been doing this for a while. I mean, and this part of it will be a little bit new. There'll be some more clarification coming out about the details of this soon. But this information was just sent out today as part of some of Dr. Marano's communication as well. But what I can do, I can find a lot more details about that process and send it to you.
I did go ahead and put back in the links for the message that we received as families from our superintendent today, as well as the bulletin that was sent out. For those of you that are families within the Howard County Public School System, if you have not, I should just be a plug for your PIO office, but there are a lot of things that are actually really important as a parent to be doing right now, making sure your family file is updated so that the contact information is correct if the school does need to communicate with you. That's not only in the case of COVID, but like there's a lot of reasons your school might need to communicate with you. And, you know, in an emergency, what happens if there's an early dismissal? God forbid we have, you know, reasons that we would need to do that. So make sure you're updating your family file, but also make sure that you have your cell phone number and your email address is correct, because the bulletins that come out both from the school system and automatically you'll receive information from your child's school are very helpful. And I think as a parent, sometimes we can become a little lax in reading all the way to the bottom. We need to hold ourselves accountable for that, because the schools do an amazing job in trying to communicate with us, and we have to be responsible for processing that communication sometimes as well. So that's my plug, as a parent lecturing other parents.
Awesome. Well, I want to take the time on behalf of our senior pastor, Robert Turner, to really thank each and every one of you for spending some time with us tonight to get our little babies ready for school and to ease some of those questions and fears that our parents and caregivers have as we send them back into the classroom. So we are praying as a church for every administrator, every teacher, every child, every caregiver, every parent, as they go through this process of trying to bring some normalcy back into their kids' life through school. And so thank you for your expertise, for your extended knowledge, for all of the wonderful things that Howard County Public Schools is ready to offer their families and their students. We are grateful for you all, and we know that you have a long way to go and a lot more work to do. So we are behind you here at St. John Baptist Church. To everyone watching, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. This has been extremely valuable, and we are excited about what is coming forth for your families and your students as they enter back into the classroom. We are keeping you all in prayer that this COVID-19 and this variant doesn't come anywhere near you, and that you are safe and well in Jesus' name. Good night, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your evening.